Okay, let's continue with our discussion in chapter one. The last thing that I want to talk about is productivity. Okay, one thing that you notice throughout this whole semester is that we're going to be looking at different metrics to try and figure out how efficient a business is running, how effective a certain process would be. And so we try to capture knowledge by knowing how well we are utilizing the different resources we have to arrive at a given output. Okay. So the first metric that we're going to be looking at, and which is in chapter one, is what's our productivity? How well do we utilize our resources to arrive at a given output, right? So if you look at this formula here, productivity metric equals your output divided by your input. It's very basic. You should not overthink this one. You just have to figure out how much product did we make and how many resources did we use to make that product. Okay. So let's look at this simple example here where we have 3 employees processing 600 insurance policies in a week. They work 8 hours per day, 5 days per week. What is the labor productivity metric? Okay. So I want to extract 2 pieces of information here. What's our output? What's our input? Bring those together, calculate our labor productivity metric. Very basic. Okay. So output in this case here is that this company was generating insurance policies, and these 2 employees made a total of 600 insurance policies, or drafted 600 insurance policies in a week. Okay. Now, our input here is that we have 3 employees. So our resource is 3 employees, but I want to break our input into how much total time was available within the course of this 1 week. So we had 3 employees working 8 hours a day and working 5 days a week. Okay. So our total input for this company for this 1 week was 120 hours. Okay. So in 120 hours, these guys were able to generate 600 policies. Okay. Our labor metric here then becomes, to just be a simple 600 divided by 120, right? And what I get here is that the productivity here was approximately 5 policies every hour. Okay. So if I was a manager trying to figure out whether or not this is acceptable, I at least now have a numbers to start working with, and I can say, on average, we generate 5 policies each hour. Okay. I might then use that as a starting point, give them work targets, maybe tell them, I would like you to up your game and underwrite 6 policies every hour, 7 policies every hour. Okay. So it's a starting point. It's a starting point. It's something that you could use to try and figure out exactly how well a given process or a given resource is working towards generating a certain level of output. Now, another way that this information could be used would be to try and, again, benchmark how well business did on its labor productivity by looking at how well we did year on year. Okay, so the data we have below here looks at a couple of things. How many units were sold over the course of a given year? How many hours of labor did they utilize to achieve the level of output they had? What is the dollar value in the sales that they had? And what is the total cost of manufacturing the product that they had? Okay, so to calculate our labor productivity, again, it's your output divided by your input. And let's go ahead and just fill in information for these 3 years here. So for 2021, our labor productivity here is simply going to be our output of 2.175 million divided by our input. And in this case, it's a labor productivity metric. So I'm only interested in labor. Okay. So divide that by 115,000. I get 18.92. Okay. So I have a formula in place here, very simple, very basic formula. It's just dividing unit sales by employment hours. And I could drag this across and figure out how well we did in all 3 years. Okay. So we have 18.92 in year one, in 2021, 21.92 in year two, and then finally we're down to, we move up to 24.662 in year three. Okay, so what do these numbers tell me? The numbers tell me that for every unit of labor, we're able to, or every labor hour that we put in, we get back, our output is 18.92 units of product. Okay, compare that to 2020. This is 2022. That goes up, so there's been some improvement there. We are making more product within each hour, and in the final year that goes up even higher. So that's a good sign. There's a trend there that we'd like to see. If you were to graph this, you'd see that this shows a good projection. We are a good trend moving upwards in terms of productivity. So that's something that business we want to see. I don't want to see this trending downwards because it means that we're losing out on productivity. Okay, so that is something that would be of concern if the trend was trending downwards. Okay, so this looks good. This looks good. Okay, something else that I could do would be to see what's the year-on-year percentage growth. So from this first year to the second year, how much of an increase in productivity do we have as a percentage? And in this regard here, I would get the difference between 21.91 and 18.92 and divide it by 18.92, the initial year's labor productivity metric. Okay, so that gives me a number of 0.15, and I'll change this to a decimal point or to a percentage, and it tells me that between 2021 and 2022, our labor productivity improved by 16%. Okay, so I already have a formula here. I'm going to drag it to figure out what about between 2022 and 2023, and using the same formula, I get that from 2022 to 2023, our productivity also increased by a slightly smaller fraction. Okay, and finally, I might want to see over the 2 or 3 year period, what is our total increase in productivity, right? So in that case, I'll be trying to compare the 24.66 to the 18.92. Okay, so this would give me 24.66 minus 18.92 divided by 18.2. Okay, so again, as a percentage, we have a 30% increase in productivity over this 3 years period. Okay, so it's a pretty decent jump in productivity. Okay, so that's a good thing. Now, that was just labor productivity. And we just look at one factor of production, labor. Typically, most businesses don't just use one factor of production. Chances are that you're going to be using employees, but you're also going to be using equipment. You're going to be using robots, maybe. And so rather than just focusing on how much productivity we got out of the labor, what if we thought about all the different things that are put together to arrive at that output? Okay, so on the second tab here, we look at the scenario that has more than one specific input. Okay, the question reads: calculate the productivity for the following operation. A team of workers makes 400 units of product, which is sold in the market for $10 each. The accounting department reports that for this job, the actual costs are $400 for labor, $1,000 for materials, and $300 for overhead. Okay. Now, with a multi-factor productivity metric, we typically want to try and put everything in similar units like that. I'm not saying 3 employees plus 5 computers plus 6 units of electricity. A common denominator would be to put everything in dollar terms, right? So that way we are able to figure out how much we paid for employees, how much we paid for material, how much we paid for overhead, and so on. Okay, so the multi-factor productivity metric, again, it's what's your output divided by what's your total input for the different resources that are used to make that output. So in this example here, output here is 400 units. Okay, but I want to put this in the same units of measure as what I have for my inputs. So instead of just using our 400, I will multiply that by the cost or the price that we sell that product at. Okay, and arrive at a value of $4,000. Okay, now input is just simply what are the different resources that we use, what's the dollar value, sum that up, that becomes your total value of your inputs. Right? So that then means we're going to have our labor cost at 400 added to our material cost of 1,000 added to our overhead cost is 300. Okay, and this again, this is in dollars. Okay, so if you divide this two here, we get what's called a multi-factor productivity metric. So F6 divided by F7, and I get a number. Okay, so this number here tells me that our multi-factor productivity value of 2.35 says for this combination of inputs, we get approximately 2.35 units of output. Okay. Again, you can use this similar to what you did with labor productivity. If you have multiple time periods, you can use this to try and figure out, did we do better this year compared to last year with the different types of resources that we use to arrive at the same output. Okay, so if I go back to the first tab I have here, and I'll post this spreadsheet to Folio, we can try and calculate our multi-factor productivity metric for the data that we had here. Okay, now keep in mind that as we're calculating this, I want our data to be in the same metrics. Okay, so I will look to see, do I have the dollar value of our output? Do I have the dollar value of our inputs? If I do have those two, I can calculate my multi-factor productivity metric. Okay, so we have sales up here, you have employment data there. But in this specific example here, they've lumped up all the different costs of the different inputs used into this row right here. Okay, so we have also our output in terms of the dollar value of the sales of the products we're selling. And so we can go ahead and just quickly figure out how well we did the multi-factor productivity by having our output divided by our total input. Okay, that first time period, there's 2 zeros there, so there's really nothing, but I can drag the formula across and get some numbers that we could use to determine how well we are doing. Okay, so looking at these two numbers here, let me leave this with 2 decimal points. You can tell that between 2022 and 2023, our multi-factor productivity metric went up, which is what we want to see, right? We're becoming better doing what it is that we're doing, and that is something that we want to see. So as a percentage, this minus 1.24 divided by 1.24 gives us a value of 2.3, right? So our multi-factor productivity went up by approximately 2.3% from 2022 to 2023. Okay, so that's just the gist of this one simple metric, the productivity metric. And as you're doing your homework, I know you come across a question too that asks you to try and do something similar. Okay, all the best and have a good weekend. I'll see you guys on Wednesday.